San Diego, actually, where I've lived for a long time.
Oh, nice.
And here we are, we're live now. Hi, it's really great to see you, Bill. Thank you for joining me. I'm going to introduce us both, just for those of us on one end or the other who need introduction. So I'm Dane Dormio. I am interviewing today. I'm really pleased and grateful and honored to be interviewing Bill Douglas. Those of us who know Bill need no introduction, but for those of us who don't already know who Bill Douglas is, he's best known to most of us as the founder and global organizer of World Tai Chi Day. He's a nationally and internationally recognized author, speaker, and humanitarian in the area of promoting Tai Chi and Qigong as a practice for individual and global peace and healing. He and his wife Angela, through World Tai Chi Day, have been uniting practitioners around the globe and introducing new audiences to the benefits of Tai Chi and Qigong every year for over 2 decades now, right? It's been
it's
it's in the ballpark at least, right? Since the first World Tai Chi Day. And he himself has worked directly with everybody from ambassadors and politicians to convicted criminals and special needs children to the sick and elderly to demonstrate the healing potential of Tai Chi. And he teaches and inspires thousands of others across the globe to do the same. Currently, he's teaching Tai Chi through the University of Kansas Hospital, which offers programs for patients dealing with varied conditions, including heart disease, Parkinson's disease, multiple sclerosis, diabetes, fibromyalgia, chronic pain, and other conditions, many conditions like that. Bill and Angela have both received many honors and recognitions for their work, including induction to the World Internal Arts Hall of Fame, and they've been all over major media channels, the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, BBC Radio, Prevention Magazine. They're also best-selling authors on Amazon. Their book is The Complete Idiot's Guide to Tai Chi and Qigong, and their DVD anthology is called Tai Chi and Qigong, Prescription for the Future. So that's as much as I could really condense an introduction, and as concise as I can make it. There's really a lot to say about you and your work, but I hope that's enough, at least to give people an idea of what you're about and get us started on talking about some interesting topics relating to Tai Chi and world transformation, which are both subjects that are very near and dear to my heart. They're both. I actually have my own massively transformative purpose along those lines, and that's why the work you've done has always resonated with me. So on that general subject of Tai Chi and Qigong for transformation, where can we go from there?
Well, one thing that I wanted to add is I have a new book called The Tao of Tai Chi, The Making of a New Science. And in that book, I get into how World Tai Chi and Qigong Day unfolded and the things that happened to me. I had personal experiences. Maybe we'll get a chance to talk about the ones you had as well, that kind of led me in this direction. But it was the it's really interesting when you look back at this over the 20 years, because there's been a lot of kind of copycat events that have evolved that followed the same pattern as Tai Chi and Qigong. For example, the Indian government just started World Yoga Day a couple of years ago. They call it International Day of Yoga. And I just find it fascinating that it was Tai Chi and Qigong people that really kind of opened the portal on this possibility of global connection around a health and healing concept. And I think it really is a testament to the potential of Tai Chi and Qigong to have a huge impact in the world in a lot of different ways. And that's opening a can that we could talk about for hours and hours. So I'll just shut up for a second to see what you have to say about that.
Well, that sets off several light bulbs in my mind. I certainly, yeah, so our personal experiences are definitely something we can talk about. I definitely have had my signposts from the universe, and also the sort of viral spread of the movement based on the World Tai Chi and Qigong Day model, and yoga is actually a really interesting comparison, because something I like to talk about, and I find it's helpful to educate and inform people about, is the similarities and differences between Tai Chi and yoga, the parallels, comparison, contrast. But I think what just to simplify things, maybe we should clarify some terminology, because instead of having to use Tai Chi and Qigong together all the time, I find it helps to clarify what these things mean. I understand why it started as World Tai Chi Day, and then you kind of had to include Qigong, so it had to be World Tai Chi and Qigong Day. So now some places it's listed as World Tai Chi Day, like the website worldtaichiday.org, but it's also called World Tai Chi and Qigong Day. And it's kind of hard to use. It seems like it's hard to use one of these terms without using the other. So I'd like to get your take on what is the difference between Tai Chi and Qigong, kind of from a layperson's perspective, and why would you use one of those terms rather than the other?
Yeah, I guess, if I was going to use one term, to be the most accurate, I would probably use the term Qigong, because Qigong is so all inclusive. Because the way that I was trained and the way that my Tai Chi has evolved is my Tai Chi is a form of Qigong. And so I go back to the definition of Qigong, which is two meanings, one being breathing exercise and the other one being life energy exercise. And so I think that our Tai Chi evolves into a Qigong exercise. Now, the reason that I tend to use Tai Chi more often in my articles and in my books is because it's more well known. People know they've heard the word Tai Chi a lot more than Qigong. And just to kind of give you an example of my modus operandi is when we first started, World Tai Chi and Qigong Day kind of started around the same time that we released the first edition of our Complete Idiot's Guide to Tai Chi and Qigong book. And what I did when I was trying to figure out which spelling to use on Tai Chi and Qigong, what I decided to do was to just go to Google. And I went to Google and I entered the different spellings of Tai Chi and I entered the different spellings of Qigong. And what I did was I chose the two that had the most listings, because I wanted to use spellings that people already were open to, that they'd already heard of. And I took a lot of flack from the purists, because I was using two different, anglicized versions of Chinese. But I didn't care about being proper. My whole goal, through all these processes, is to reach the maximum number of people as possible. And so what I did was I went to the place where they were at, instead of trying to bring them to the place that I was at. And the reason that I've just kind of always been operating on this model is because I really think that the planet is going through a huge transition right now. It's a combination of the rapid expanse of the human population. In my lifetime, the population of the planet has quadrupled just in one lifetime. And but then also you have these other factors. You have all the environmental issues and things that come out of that rapid expansive population, and also the massive change that it puts people through. you know, faster than any generation in the history of the planet has ever had to deal with, especially with the technology revolution, because, you know, which we're, you know, immersed in right now, doing this interview. And,
Yes.
you know, and it's not going to get any slower. It's going to get faster and faster. I think the speed of technological change is doubling about every 18 months. And if you do the math on that, what our grandchildren are going to have to endure as far as just relentless, rapid change is, it'll blow your head. It'll explode your mind. And so people desperately need some kind of tools to help them traverse this flood of change that we're all going through in a way that doesn't break them apart. And I think Tai Chi and Qigong it's strange because I think, you know, they've evolved over, you know, if you look at Qigong, you're looking at thousands of years, and with Tai Chi, you're looking at many centuries. But it's strange that these things evolved over all these millennia. And then when, you know, when China opened in the early 70s, then, you know, these Tai Chi and Qigong masters started to spread around the planet. And then, you know, through a lot of people's work, you know, Peter Wayne at Harvard, and, you know, but also through our work with World Tai Chi and Qigong Day, is we massively infuse these things around the planet in a huge way at a time when the planet needs these things absolutely the most. And so that's always been our goal, is to just go to where people are and spread the word on this in every way that we can, as fast as we can.
I'm taking notes here with all the light bulbs that are going off in my head. But this idea of Qigong, actually, I want to speak to what the sort of linguistic conundrum that you described of being accurate, Qigong really being more accurate term in more the sense of being more general and inclusive, and whereas Tai Chi being something more recognizable and reachable. I think a lot of people are the language is kind of in flux, and a lot of people who teach Tai Chi and or Qigong experience this same kind of conundrum, and the public perception of Tai Chi is shifting along with everything else, and the public awareness and perception of Qigong. So the whole there is this degree of sort of cultural flux that is still the reverberations from the spreading that you're talking about are still permeating the intellectual biosphere.
The collective psyche.
The collective psyche. There you go. The memosphere, if you will. So I typically, depending on who I'm talking with and what context, I prefer to default to talking about Qigong, and but I use the words interchangeably. So for anybody who is not hip with the lingo, if we say Tai Chi or Qigong, I think we pretty much mean the same thing, and they just kind of get used interchangeably.
Well, you know, another thing, as you were talking, I'm you know, kind of clarifying in my mind something. And when we first started organizing World Tai Chi Day, I'll just say World Tai Chi Day. Yeah. But when we first started organizing it, you know, I mean, like a lot of Tai Chi teachers, the only Tai Chi, I don't mean the only Tai Chi, but the main Tai Chi that I'd been exposed to was the Tai Chi that I grew up in. You know, I started in my early 20s, and so over all these decades, I've been with that. My teacher was a woman named Jazz Booth, and she really focused on the internal. You know, we want to use the term, the internal Qigong or Neigong aspects of Tai Chi and Qigong. And so when I first started organizing World Tai Chi Day, I just had this assumption that all Tai Chi was the same as the Tai Chi that I had grown up with, so to speak. And I realized that it wasn't. There was actually kind of a schism in the Tai Chi world, where there was kind of a mechanistic approach to Tai Chi as a utilitarian tool. And then there were other people that were moving in a direction where it was more of kind of a mind-body meditation practice. And there was, some tension between these different disparities. I remember, over the years, people would call me New Agey. And I hated that term because what it does is it just blows away any kind of rational argument or discussion of real reality. And it just labels.
It's a pigeonholing tactic.
And so, but I think what's happened is that Tai Chi and Qigong itself are in evolution. And I think what you're seeing now is you're seeing more of a general consensus in the Tai Chi and Qigong community of the fact that Tai Chi and Qigong are powerful mind-body practices that have huge potential on a lot of different levels beyond just the physical. And I think there's a few people that really helped that along. One person I'd just like to mention is Li Jianfeng, the great wushu coach from China who ended up becoming a Qigong teacher. And I saw him at the National Qigong Association when I first announced World Tai Chi Day many years ago, and he was speaking before I did. And he said he decided to make a transition in his approach, because what he saw was the main issue that humanity was facing was that the chi of the world it needed to be infused with love, and that really it affected me, and I think it's affected a lot of people in the way that we approach it. And he actually stopped me in the hallway after I'd done my presentation on World Tai Chi Day. And I didn't know him. And so he just came up to me and he said, "Why are you doing this?" He said, "If you do this, do it for love or don't do it at all." And that really, that changed the course of my life. It's funny how one person can do that,
Oh, that's so great. And so I just am feeling and imagining that resonates with so many people on so many levels. that message. Direction I'm really intrigued to explore is the idea of Qigong as Qigong and Tai Chi as tools for navigating accelerating change. And I want to preface this with just a mention of some people who've been really influential in that area. Because I'm curious actually what your kind of exposure and familiarity with this arena is. It wasn't that many years ago that I read Future Shock, Alvin Toffler, which was originally, I don't remember the exact date, 1950s. I'm pretty sure it was his first edition, and still today it's just mind-blowingly prescient and cutting edge and amazing. And that guy is still alive and still publishing work, as far as I know. Last I checked, I think. So that has been a big influence for me, and a big influence for the world. I think more than people realize. And then I actually have on my a vision board that I make has some of these guys. Buckminster Fuller, obviously, way ahead of his time, but not that far ahead, or ahead of his time, but not that far ahead. And currently Ray Kurzweil and Peter Diamandis are two of the big influencers in this area, and I've followed their work really closely. I've read their books, and this is a subject that actually it ties in with me with Tai Chi in a very intimate way, with my own Tai Chi journey, and it's where I one of those ways is the idea of a massively transformative purpose, a a passion, a goal that's going to transform the lives of a billion people on the planet. And my vision for that is a billion people practicing Qigong, a billion people all using these tools for regulating their mind-body energy system to navigate this tsunami of change where things are going to change so much and so fast. And we haven't even, it's just getting started. So much is going to be so different, and the going back to full circle to the idea of future shock. The title of that book, for those who haven't heard of it or aren't familiar, it's parallels with the word culture shock. Culture shock is where you go to a new culture and everything is different, and you go through this experience of stressful change and disruption. But with culture shock, you can always go back to where you grew up and things are still the same. Future shock is where the world you live in is now so totally different, and everything is unfamiliar and difficult to navigate. But there's no place to go back to because that was the past, and you can't go back there anymore because it doesn't exist anymore. So you're just in that world. And future shock is kind of this phenomena that humanity, it was really referring to humanity as a whole experiencing, beginning to experience the accelerating signs of this effect. Mm-hmm. So yeah, the technological singularity, which I think to me, there's no distinction between the technological singularity and the spiritual ascension of humankind. It's all the same ball of wax wrapped up and intertwined together. And for me, and I think for the world, Qigong is a huge part of that. And that's something that is really near and dear to my heart and really closely ties in with my passions. So I'm really curious hear about your thoughts and experience with that whole realm of thought.
Yeah, all the people you talked about, they're very fascinating and have so much to offer. I think one, and the only reason I mention this because it segues into something else. But the one place that I part with Ray is the idea of incorporating electronics into the human mind or into the human brain. And the reason that I do is because we are just barely beginning to scratch the surface of what this incredible miracle of the human mind is, and the potential of the mind, just the way that it is, without introducing any electronics or anything like that. And one of the things that I wanted to mention is I think that when you immerse yourself in futurism, which I recommend YouTube highly. There's so much great information out there on YouTube now. And what you'll find is that there's this whole other world that's going on that you wouldn't be aware of if you just watched, cable TV or corporate media or whatever. But what you start to realize when you start to immerse yourself in this, like you watch the videos of Elon Musk and, Rupert Sheldrake, and just to name a couple. But what you start what you start to realize is that the only thing that's holding humanity back from massive changes, profoundly positive changes, is the human consciousness. Because the potential for where we could be as a human society, it's like these ripe fruits of possibility are hanging all around us, but we're not reaching out to grasp them. And the reason that we're not reaching out to grasp them is because our mind is still tightened around an old reality that no longer exists. And that's where I think that Qigong and Tai Chi and mind-body practices, I see all mind-body practices as sisters of the same family. You know, some teachers say, oh, don't do yoga or don't do transcendental meditation or whatever. I don't say that. I say, you know, go ahead and do all those things. You know, find your core practice and make that your core practice. But, you know, investigate everything because it may add to your core practice. But what these things all have in common is they have this ability. And I think Tai Chi is unique in this in some ways. But they have this ability to loosen the human psyche. And one thing that my Tai Chi teacher used to tell me, and this was, you know, this was like 40 years ago, she said that the external world is just a reflection of what's happening on an energetic level. And you were talking about the, you know, the technology revolution and the mass mind of, you know, the internet. And now we've got blockchain technology. If anybody hasn't looked into Bitcoin, the possibilities of that are revolutionary and beautiful. And so, you know, we're seeing this global mind being formed on a technological level, but that's just a reflection of what has always been on a consciousness level. Everything is connected. You know, you look at quantum entanglement, you know, and you see that physicists understand this as well. And so, you know, it's fascinating because you look at these, you know, these ancient Taoist concepts of how we're connected to everything and how that when we're at, you know, at one with ourselves, we're at one with the universe. And you start to see with the new physics and the new, you know, the ability of technology to be able to, you know, study these things, that these people were actually tapping into truths, you know, physics, you know, real physics, real truths. And so this global mind that we're creating, what's holding back the positive potential of it is that we're squeezing onto an old reality that no longer exists. And that's one of the reasons that I think it's so important to get mind-body practices out around the world. Now, with World Tai Chi Day, we focus most heavily on the medical research because that's a real tangible thing. It's a real tangible thing that people can wrap their heads around and they can pass on to other people. And it's real tangible to them because it's immediately, you know, connected with their life. But as an individual, not the representative World Tai Chi and Qigong Day, but as Bill Douglas, one of the things that's profoundly motivated me is the excitement of seeing that if we can, you know, pass on technologies around the world that can help people ungrip that pineal gland, you know, and really allow space for that openness, that lightness, that Qi or whatever it is that connects us to everyone else and everything else, or rather allows us to open to the reality of that connection and to let go of our grip on old patterns so that we can open to new possibilities. And this, you know, a lot of people think, oh, you know, things are going to get worse and worse because there's so many people on the planet. That's baloney. The possibilities of creating a planet where people can live in dignity and you know, not have to suffer and struggle it's right here. It's the possibility of that is right here. The technology exists and it's right here. And our state of consciousness is going to take us in a different direction if we can elevate that state of consciousness. And that's where I think Tai Chi and Qigong and other mind-body practices can help us elevate the vibratory rate of consciousness. And a lot of that's connected with the pineal gland. As we practice, you know, breathing and letting go and allowing space, that pineal gland starts to affect things in different ways. And one of the things, you know, talking about future shock, one of the things that's coming, and this isn't like a philosophical possibility. This is a reality. And the reality is that very quickly robots are going to be doing almost everything that we think of as work today. And so the state of our consciousness is going to go in one way or another. It's either going to grip onto the old way of doing things, or it's going to embrace a whole new way of doing things and see ourselves as a connected humanity. And we're going to have to actually invent jobs. And I envision jobs where somebody gets up in the morning and they call some old lady named Martha. And they say, how you doing, Martha? Do you want me to pick anything up for you before I come over? And their whole day is dedicated to making sure that Martha has a great day. And that's their job. And so these are going to be the jobs of the future. These are things that only human beings can do. You know what I mean? But if we grip onto the old way, then, you know, we're going to be creating a world that's going to be desperate because you're going to have mass unemployment. You know, you're going to have mass unemployment as, you know, robots begin to do it, everything. Some people think, oh, well, people will be able to, you know, be programmers. Well, some will, but it's not going to replace the number of workers that are, I mean, Tesla's just coming out with the first electric semi. and they're creating it so that they can have two robot semis driving behind the first semi. And I mean, there's virtually nothing that anybody does except for maybe teaching Tai Chi and Qigong and yoga, and just being humane and humane human beings helping other people. That's what humans. I think that's what we were put here on this planet to do. And the technology is going to put us in a place where we can have very fulfilling lives. Most people around the planet are not fulfilled by the work that they do. It's a staggering amount. I think it's almost like 90%. And it's because we're wired to it's like we have a DNA structure that rewards us physically when we are engaged in altruistic acts that help other human beings or the life, the biosphere or whatever. And then also our DNA reacts negatively when we act in, hedonistic or selfish ways. I mean, this is science. And so we're wired to create this world of humanity and compassion. And the technology will give us an opportunity to do that. But only if our minds can let go of old ways and open to new possibility. And so that's the thing that's really excited me about, being involved in spreading these things around the planet.
This is really, really great. I'm having ideas faster than I know we could possibly discuss them. It's like we could have 15 different conversations cover all of this. But one thing that's really alive for me is actually talking about transforming the consciousness of humanity, finding the low-hanging fruits, and this is that, and also the pineal gland is actually makes me curious about another area of influence that we could discuss. But in terms of consciousness and poverty consciousness and holding on to old ways of doing things and seeing change as something negative, something to fear, something to fight against, rather than something positive to embrace, to celebrate, which resonates a lot with the message of the Tao Te Ching, which is threaded throughout all of this. I'm right now. I'm in Nepal, being in a third world economy, and in the U.S. I mainly live in California, in San Diego. I've lived there for a long time, and California is one of the largest economies on the planet all by itself. I mean, it's like practically it could be its own nation, and it's, if it was, it would be one of the richest ones on the planet. And being here in Kathmandu in Nepal, where it's just the contrast has really been enlightening for me. I've spent time in the third world before. I lived in Bangkok, and the experience being in that type of environment is. It's a type of looking glass effect. Like, you go through the looking glass, you go from a place where everything is clean and new and shiny, and that's what the norm and what people expect, and then you go to a place where everything is old and dirty and run down and broken, and that's the norm and that's what people expect, and the only reason, it's just a really stark illustration for me of the very idea that the reason these conditions persist is because the human consciousness clings to them. And mainly, I think that the biggest factor of all, there's a lot of things that could be implicated, but the biggest factor is a sheer unfamiliarity. The lack of exposure to ideas, information, and the energy of higher consciousness. And you mentioned the pineal gland several times. Speaking of higher consciousness, you mentioned the pineal gland, which I'm curious. Another person who's been a big influence on me is Stan Groff, and all of his work with non-ordinary states of consciousness. For about 40 years, he's really one of the leading pioneers in that area. Started as a psychiatrist in Czechoslovakia in his early career, and is one of the first psychiatrists to work with LSD therapeutically, and went on to has gone on to have a very fruitful career based on that initial research, working with holotropic states. The term holotropic just means states of sort of spiritual openness of various forms. And a lot of this wisdom comes from it's been forgotten in the modern world, and it comes from ancient traditions. Circling back around to the dispersion of the ancient Chinese wisdom, aggregated in the practices of Qigong and Tai Chi, being kind of reintroduced to the modern world that fell asleep and forgot about it. A lot of one thing that Stan talks about is how our civilization is very advanced in the physical technological realm, but the pre-industrial civilizations and cultures knew way more than us about the spiritual realm. So that's just a huge area of intersection that I think is ripe for being explored.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think one of the things that's happening right now, you know, talking about the rapid global transformation, is that these worlds are starting to come together. So now, you know, with the ability to, you know, for scientists to be able to observe how the brain reacts and what goes on inside the brain and so on and so forth, it's like the line between technological, scientific exploration and spiritual exploration is starting to blur, and I find that fascinating. The pineal gland, for many years in my Tai Chi and Qigong practice, we practiced meditations, and we referred to it as the upper dantian, or the crystal palace, which is the pituitary pineal gland area in the center of the skull. And so a while back, I was doing I get a lot of physicians in my classes, you know, from teaching in hospitals for all these years. And it's been really fascinating. And anyway, we were going through our meditation. We always start with meditation before we do our moving Qigong meditation, and then our Tai Chi. And during the meditation, I had introduced the class to the upper dantian, or the crystal palace, as we went through the meditation. And one of the there was a physician who was in my class. I think it was internal medicine. I can't remember. But anyway, he came up to me after the break, and he said it's interesting. You know, you talked about the pineal gland and the crystal palace, because he said that the pineal gland contains crystal formations. And so I thought that was fascinating, you know, because, I mean, it's been called the Crystal Palace for, you know, I don't know, probably hundreds of years. So how did they know, you know, how did they know there were crystals in there? And so then so that spurred me on. So then I went home and I got on the Google machine and I started doing some research, and I found out that there was an NIH study that was funded. And what they were looking at was whether the crystal formations in the pineal gland were able to pick up and react to signals from outside the body. Because if you look at a radio, that's how a radio operates. A radio has crystals, and it receives electromagnetic radiation in the form of radio waves from the atmosphere, and then it turns them into, you know, the sounds that we hear on the radio. And
Right, the crystal is what converts the um, electromagnetic signal into an electronic signal.
yeah, right, right. And so it takes something that's nebulous and it creates a coherency, yeah, in the consciousness of the radio, so to speak. And so you start to look at that and you start to realize that when the Taoists were telling us, that when we became one with ourselves, we became one with the universe, and it starts to make sense in a way that you never, where it's not like a mystical mumbo jumbo kind of thing, but it's like, okay, now if that pineal gland can let go and allow space for that openness, that lightness, and it has some impact on this crystal formation so that they become more receptive to the reality that everything is connected, that we are connected to everyone. And that's, this is, these meditative, esoteric concepts, they're not just relegated to China. I mean, the early, you look at the Gnostic Gospels, the early Christian church was, they called it, Gnostic meant knowing, opening to that knowing of pure consciousness. And, in Judaism, you got the Kabbalah, and, you just go all over the planet and you find that this crystal palace or this pineal gland was like a big focus of these traditions all around the planet. And so it's not like when we go through the meditations and eventually I always tell my students, eventually your moving Qigong and your Tai Chi will become a meditation. At first it's mechanical, but you do it 1,000 times or 10,000 times, and then your mind starts to let go. And then you go into other states, you start to go from that beta wave brainwave state to the alpha brainwave state. And in that alpha brainwave state, that's when you're letting go. You're letting go of your attachments to the world. And a lot of that letting go is in the pineal gland area, the center of the skull. When that area is tight, everything, the whole body's tight. When that area lets go, the whole body, the whole field lets go. And so by allowing that to open, it seems possible that those crystals, it may affect those crystals so that they open up to not something new or different, but the reality that we're all connected. And that creates that opens a window or a doorway of possibility that can transform the whole planet. And we were talking about the first world and the third world. One of the transformative events in my life was after my father died. I was really lost for a long time because I had lost my mother first, and then my father about 6 months later, and then about 6 months after that, I lost my youngest son. And it was one of those. It's interesting because I watch a lot of documentaries on consciousness and things, and a lot of people when they go through a period where they really just don't see any more point in their existence. It's like it shatters them, and then they're open, And I had a bunch of experiences, and then also my father left us a little bit of oil stock. He worked for Standard Oil, and so me and my brother and sisters divided it all up. It was a few $1,000s, and I took some, and it was kind of synchronistic because right at that time, I had started getting kind of interested in the nuclear freeze movement. It was a international movement to try to get the United States and the Soviet Union to freeze their nuclear weapons production in the 1980s. Because in the 1980s, for those that aren't aware, the U.S. and the Soviets kept moving their missiles closer and closer to each other in Eastern Europe. And that was a very dangerous thing because it pretended the possibility of an accidental nuclear war, because sometimes they would see a flock of geese and they'd go on alert. They thought it was a missile. And so I became interested, and I ended up going to a Catholic church that was holding a teach-in on the nuclear freeze movement. And I ended up getting involved in the nuclear freeze movement because I had young children at the time. I had 2 other children aside from the son that I'd lost. And so it was a big thing in my mind. I wanted to make sure that, my kids, had a beautiful planet like I did. And, through the course of getting involved in the nuclear freeze movement, I ended up meeting some nuns who were involved in the issues in Central America. There were wars going on in El Salvador and Honduras and Guatemala And then also there was an attempt to overthrow the new government in Nicaragua. And I started learning things that I had just never been exposed to before, that I wasn't hearing about on TV. And I ended up taking a little bit of that money that my dad left, and I became an international observer volunteer for the United Nations High Commission on Refugees. And I went to work for about a month and a half in a Salvadoran refugee camp in Honduras and a Guatemalan refugee camp in Honduras. And that was a big transformative experience for me, because what I realized was that a lot of the suffering in those countries was caused because people like me were ignorant of the fact of how our tax dollars were being used, that were aggravating the situation and in fact fueling poverty in these countries. And so what I started to realize was that the state of our consciousness in the developed world is important not just to us, but it's important to vast reaches of the planet, because we're living in a world where the first world has its fingers all over the planet. And so over time, I began to realize that that really the United States, if you stop to think about it, we're the new Rome. We're the new Rome. There's no power that even comes close to the kind of military might that we have. And so as citizens of the new Rome, we have a special responsibility to become very conscious. And I think, regular meditation is a part of that consciousness, because one of the things that they found with the new science is they found that when people meditate on a regular basis, it actually physically increases the empathy and compassion parts of their brain, and it shrinks the stress and fear parts of the brain. And when we're living in fear, I always said there's nothing more dangerous than a frightened human being, because when we're living in fear, we tend to react out of fear and panic. And, and anytime we've done that in our personal lives, oftentimes things came out of that we regretted. We said something to somebody that we would regret for the rest of our lives when we were operating in that mode. But when we go into the meditative experience, the empathy and compassion parts of the brain start to open. And I had an ER physician that I was giving private lessons to, because he had such a crazy schedule. And after the second week, he told me, he said, "Bill," he goes, "I just got to tell you," he goes, this sitting Qigong meditation, it was Neigong energy meditation. He goes, "I don't get it." He goes, "I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what I'm, it just doesn't make any sense to me." And I said, "Well, just hang in there, John." And then the next week when I came back, he goes, "I think I'm starting to get this, this meditation stuff." And I said, "Oh, really?" I said, "What happened, John?" And he said, "Well," he goes, "my ER staff," he was, like I said, he was an emergency room physician. He said, "My ER staff told me this week, we don't know what you've been doing, but you are way easier to get along with than you used to be. So keep doing it." And as Tai Chi and Qigong teachers, we see this again and again. We become easier to get along with. And our students all have stories, about how they're easier to get along with. It's like things slide off of them that they don't react to in the same way. And they just, we're more open to, what is going on with the other, creatures around us in an empathetic way that we weren't before, because we've let go of our grip on life. And then that pineal gland opens, and, and then we're just more empathetic creatures. And so, so this is a personal benefit that we get from these mind-body practices. But I also see a larger global benefit, especially for those of us that are living in countries that are very wealthy and very powerful.
Right. The group energy field is it compounds the power of individual cultivation. That's why the number 1 billion people, 1 billion people is only a fraction of the people on the planet, but it's a significant fraction. And to me, it seems that there has to be some kind of catalyzing critical mass reached, and at least
have you heard about the TM experiments, like the one in Washington, D.C., right, where they brought it. I can't remember what their critical mass was. They called it the Maharishi effect, but I think it was only like 1 or 2% of the population, something like that. And they saw massive improvements in the behavior of the whole. In the case of Washington D.C., the HRA, homicide, rapes, and assaults went way down when they brought all those meditators in during the high crime season, and that was and they only had like 1 or 2%. So I mean, you know, you're talking like 15%. You know, imagine if you had 15% as opposed to 1 or 2%. And I think that's already happening, to be honest with you. Have you ever heard of a book called The Better Angels of Our Nature by Steven Pinker?
Right. Actually, that's something I wanted to, the specific question I wanted to ask you is, do you think the world is getting better or worse, just in a general sense? And that book definitely relates to that question. But just to pose that question, do you see the world as getting better or getting worse?
Yeah. It's getting vastly better. And Steven Pinker, who's a social psychologist at Harvard that wrote that book, The Better Angels of Our Nature, everybody should read it. It's really thick. And I'll be honest with you, I haven't read the whole thing, but I read, I read into it deeply, and then I started flipping through to find things that I was interested in. And what you find, it's a meticulous examination of the forensics of humanity from the very early humans up to today. And what you realize, and it's a solid case, you can't argue it. Once you read the book, you'll understand what I'm saying. But the planet Earth is vastly less violent than it has ever been before in human history. Vastly less violent. And that spurred me on to do some of my own research. And one of the things that I discovered was that if you look at the FBI and United Nations statistics, what you find is that violent crime rates are dropping precipitously in the United States as well as many other countries around the world. And nobody can explain it. Why is this happening? Why are people becoming less violent? And I think part of it is that meditation is spreading around the planet, and people's empathy and compassion parts of their brains are growing, but it's also resonating out into the collective psyche. Now, this kind of comes full circle back to what we were talking about earlier with future shock and the inability of people to let go of old perceptions of reality that no longer exist. And one of the problems that we have is that the world is spending increasing amounts of money on military spending. And in the United States, our prison complex is exploding. We imprison more people than any country on the planet. And so the reason that we're spending so much money on prisons and that we're spending so much money on militarism in the first world is because human beings are holding on to an old way of seeing the world that no longer exists. We actually live in a much safer planet. People are much less violent than they ever used to be. And like I said, the planet is far less violent than it's ever been before. So if you have a planet that's far less violent, you have less crime. Why are more and more people going into prisons? And why are we using more and more of our money for military expenditures? It's because the consciousness hasn't flowed into the new reality. Now, part of that is the media. In my classes, I had one lady that came up to me in my Tai Chi class, and she goes, "God, I'm so glad that I came to class today." And it was a hospital class, so I was afraid that maybe she had a relapse of her condition. She said, "I haven't felt good all week." And I said, "Oh, really? What happened?" And she goes, "That thing in France, that guy that shot those people in France." And I said, "You know what?" I said, "I'm going to give you a prescription so that you'll feel better next week." And she said, "Oh, really?" She thought I was going to give her some special Qigong exercise to make her feel better. And I said, turn off the television news. And I said, the reason it's important to do that is because the planet is actually much less violent, much safer than it's ever been before. But the news will never tell you that 6.9999999 billion people today open doors and act courteously to one another. It'll always find that one guy who did something horrifically despicable, and then they'll just focus on it, hours and hours and days and days and days, and they pump it up and they pump it up. And so what happens is when people watch the news, like I talk to them about Steven Pinker's book in my classes because I look at myself primarily as a stress management consultant. Tai Chi and Qigong just happen to be maybe the world's most effective stress management techniques. Because I think as we alleviate stress, then the pineal gland opens and it transforms people in their health and everything. But primarily, I see myself as a stress management consultant. And so I mentioned that fact in my classes, that the society and the world is actually far less violent than it's ever been in human history, because I want people to feel less stress. I want them to feel more at home and more comfortable in their community and in their nation and in the world. And when I tell them that, they look at me like I'm speaking Martian, like I'm completely, disturbed mentally to have this fantastic delusion that the world is safer. And it's because they've been stewed in this corporate media fear machine. And I think that's a problem that is part of what's holding back this planetary evolution of consciousness, is this constant immersion in fear. So I always encourage people, watch.
That's really great advice. I mean, just by itself, just turn off your TV. End of sentence. Just that is really great advice for a lot of people. I think there's a lot of cognitive surplus. There's figures on this sort of thing, the amount of cognitive surplus tied up in television, and it's enormous. But the consciousness is being freed up, and whichever direction you look in, if you look into the past, you see suffering and problems. If you look into the future, you can see potential and possibilities, and that's always true, and it's always been true. But this is a really special time that we're living in and through, and there's so many light bulbs going off in my head that I know we could have numerous follow-up discussions, but there are a couple of topics I want to make sure that we at least touch on today. I know we scheduled for an hour, so what are your time constraints right now?
I don't have any, except for one thing. I need to go to the restroom real quick.
Okay, we can allow for that. I'll be here.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Today's I don't have any class today. This is one of my 2 days off, and so I've been just like you. As we're talking, it's like when I listen to you talk about things, it's like light bulbs just start popping, and to me this is like the most fun I've had in a long time. I just love talking with somebody who likes to have light bulbs popping.
Yeah. There's definitely really great resonance going on. The things that I want to make sure that we talk about today, and I don't have any time constraints either. Right now, for me, it's 11 p.m., but tomorrow morning is the one morning of the week that I'm not teaching, so I don't have any time constraints either. But I do want to make sure that we talk about World Tai Chi Day this year, because we're actually 105 or 106 days out, so that's coming right around the corner. And also, you mentioned your other books. You mentioned one of your other books. I mentioned in the introduction, best-selling author. of complete idiot's guide to Tai Chi and Qigong, but you also have the Tao of Tai Chi, which was that was published in the last year or two.
Just last year.
Yeah, that that's and then you also have a couple of novels on Amazon as well, which are I'm assuming these are somewhat allegorical and somewhat self-referential, but mixed in with just a lot of the perceptions that you've had about had of the whole global shift and transformation of consciousness and all the stuff we've been talking about. And
yeah, yeah, in both books, the hero of the book there are women, and I decided to do that because one of the things that I've seen, and I get into this in the novels, but especially the first one. The first one was 2012, The Awakening. The second one is A Conspiracy of Spirits. But they both have female heroines in the at the center of the story, and I wanted to do that because one of the things that I've seen, and like I say, I get into this in that first novel, is that if you stop and think about it, all of the history of humanity has been very yang, very masculine. So what the masculine approach to the world is exploration, conquest, and exploitation. That's how the planet has worked. You find something, you take it, and then you exploit the resource. But when you've got, we're going to have 10 billion people on this planet pretty soon, I think. I mean, we're getting really close to it. And what that requires is a complete change in human consciousness. And that's where I think the internal arts, because, Tai Chi has often been referred to as a yin art, an internal art. And I think a lot, mind-body practices all fit into this. But what that does is it gets us in touch with this other quality of our being. The yang is the dynamic. That's the part of our consciousness and our being that gets things done in the world. But the yin is the receptive. In Taoism, we call it the feminine. And it's not a sexual thing. A man can be very yin. A woman can be very yang. Deepak Chopra said that Jesus and Buddha were very feminine in their qualities or their approach to life, and so we all have these yin yang thing going on. And so what's required of the planet now is to get in touch with our yin aspect, because what if just to give you an allegory or a metaphor or whatever, okay, if you went into a kitchen of a household with a yang approach, you would open a cabinet or a larder or whatever, and you'd stick a flag in that larder and you'd say, this is mine, I claim this. But if you walked into it with a yin approach, what you would do is you would open the cabinets and you would observe the contents of the cabinets, and then you would try to figure out how to best utilize those resources to nourish and feed the household, which in our case is 7-8 billion people. And that's the only way that we're going to be able to, it's like humanity is at graduation day. And it's like we have to evolve into a more balanced approach. We can't continue in the yang way. It's just impossible. We have to open to this yin way as well. And there needs to be a lot more yin for a while so that we can find our balance again. And so anyway, my novels explore that via the female characters who are the protagonists, or who are the main characters or heroines or whatever in the novels. And
yeah, I think of I've often really liked the metaphor of a lifeboat, which is similar to what Bucky Fuller wrote about the planet being like a lifeboat. And if you're on a lifeboat with X number of people, what do you do? Do you hoard the resources and keep everybody else away from them, or do you do an inventory of what do we have available? How many people do we have? How can we best take care of everyone? Well, what if the lifeboat happens that, X happens to be 8 billion or 9 billion? What's the difference? There's and there's when consciousness fully blooms and encircles the planet, it will just be a self-evident, undeniable reality that there is no other, and we can't externalize pain and suffering and negative consequences that we that our economy has to be a closed loop. Based on closed loop processes, we have to be continually improving and nourishing and enriching our environment on every level: physical, spiritual, biological, ecological, psychological. So I wanted to make sure that our viewers know to check out your other works, because that your book, The Tao of Tai Chi, and your novels, 2012, The Awakening, and A Conspiracy of Spirits, all on Amazon, and available for Kindle. I hope that the audiobook versions will come out soon, because that's just about the only way that I can read books anymore, and I know a lot of people are probably in the same boat. So I'm a huge fan of audiobooks. And we're both working on this vision of transforming the world by sharing and popularizing mind-body practices. I really appreciate that distinction as an even overall thing: mind-body practices in general, not even things that would be called Qigong, but things that there's many paths up the mountain, that and many forms that these tools and teachings come in, and really they're gifts from the universe. They're for anyone who looks to discover. So
well, and I've been doing Tai Chi and Qigong for about 40 years now. And the thing that I realized, in retrospect, is that my Tai Chi and Qigong teaching and practice, because all my teaching comes out of my own practice. It's like I'm the laboratory rat. It's like I experience it myself. And then
is it like channeling? Is teaching like channeling?
Yeah. When I first started teaching, it was all left brain. It was things that I had kind of memorized, from my studies and everything. And it was kind of like rote memory. And my teaching wasn't nearly what it is today. Today it's like I'm a whole different teacher. And the reason that is because as I got used to the teaching practice, what I started doing was I started always meditating before I went into a Tai Chi class. And what I did when I went into that meditation state was I let go of all my responsibility. I let go of whatever I thought I was going to talk about in class. I just let go of everything so that I could just be just like one of the students, just floating into an experience that I didn't even know what it was going to become until it unfolded before me. And when I made that shift and that transition, it's like my teaching took on this whole other quality. And it was like the classes became so much more fun, so much less tight, so much more enjoyable, and so much more exploratory and synchronous. I mean, it was like things happened in those classes that elevated me as a human being. And I was like a participant. I was no longer the guy that was in charge and responsible for making it this event. It was this, I opened up to this group consciousness. And just let it take its course. And so it's interesting to use the word.
I highlight that because I think that is a great piece of advice for any teacher. Is that specific, you sort of mentioned this tactic of have a plan, create a plan, go through the intellectual exercise of creating a plan, and then go right up to the threshold of the teaching space, the training space, and then just forget your plan and go in and let the group energy field guide the activity. It's I that's I want to highlight that because that's I think that is just a really great tactic, kind of a mental hack, because doing the intellectual exercise of planning and having a systematic framework to work from, I think is really powerful. But for me, I I pretty much always teaching has always been for me an experience of channeling, and I feel like I'm not the one in charge, like you put it. I'm just kind of a conduit, and that's my only goal really in any teaching situation, is to kind of enter that portal or enter that state, and then let whatever flows through me flow through.
Well,
But it's supported by a lot of thinking and intellectual exercise, and all the study that's gone into it. So
right.
that's what really lays the groundwork for that.
Well, it's your, generally, I always encourage people, at least, do Tai Chi and Qigong, for a couple of years at least before you start thinking about teaching, because you want to just do it just for your own experience, just your own pleasure and your own expansion, so that then when you start teaching, you'll be empathetic, with the experiences that other people are having. And the thing that I find too is when I approach it in the state that you're talking about, what happens is it just opens the space. And sometimes, the students will become part of the teaching process. They'll contribute things in the class, that I'll learn from, or that will, expand. It's like before, when I first started teaching, because I was holding on to the methodology so tightly, because, you're unsure of yourself when you first start teaching. And so you feel like, oh, I got to keep track of everything or else I'm going to forget where I was and everybody will think I'm an idiot. And then, of course, over time, you get to the point where you don't really care whether anybody thinks you're an idiot or not. It's just too much fun to go with the flow. And you don't feel the self-conscious. And so that'll evolve. But, when you go into that state, where it's just flowing through you, you use the word channeling. I don't use that because I'm in the Midwest and I don't like to use any term that'll freak anybody out. But it's just
it's kind of California lingo.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I lived there for a long time. So, but that flow is coming through you. And when you open space for that flow, it opens space for, the students' flow. And then it becomes this, kind of group therapy session sometimes that's very exciting and thrilling. And it's way more fun.
Group hypnosis. It can be a form of group hypnosis. You enter state and you pull them in with you, and the creation emerges from the group energy field.
Yeah, and I actually, when I do my meditation before I go into the class, one of the things that I do when I breathe and let go is I think, okay, I'm letting go of control of this class, and I'm opening to where this class's, higher awareness wants to go. And so it's, in a way, kind of everybody's consciousness is contributing to that flow. And then when that happens, I kind of feel myself let go, and almost kind of like I'm being washed on a wave. And when I get that feeling where I just kind of, come unglued, especially the center of the brain, the pineal gland area. But when I let go and then I just kind of feel that drift, like I'm not in control, then that's when I turn off my car and go into the class. It's like, that's the moment that I know it's time to go into the class.
So what I've found to be a really stimulating challenge is adapting, is teaching different types of groups and different types of people, and particularly working with kids. I think working with all types of people is really great. In fact, for something that I'd recommend for anybody who wants to teach is work with people that are that seem challenging to you. And for some people, like I've volunteered with senior living facilities and taught people who are or have really have significant challenges with mobility, with cognition. Sometimes they can't stand up. And or if that seems easy to you, then volunteer to teach at a youth center if that seems more challenging to you. But if you
try drug rehabilitation, court-sponsored drug rehabilitation program, that's challenging.
Yeah, exactly. Because if you have the ideal perfect student, it's really great. And I think we all are, as teachers, we're predisposed to desire that the sort of the ideal student who pays attention and is takes good care of themselves and follows directions and makes really fast progress. But working in circumstances that are less than ideal really allow you to optimize your delivery and your presentation, your teaching process. And for me, working with kids is just one of the most satisfying, enjoyable, rewarding things I can imagine. And I've been doing that pretty intensely for the last several months. And I really feel like everything that there is to get from teaching, I can get from working with kids. And I feel like if I can effectively convey this set of principles and body of kinesthetic awareness and knowledge to kids who are on a voluntary basis because they want to be there, because they want to learn, and even being all age ranges and being kids and distractible as they are, and there being a language barrier, if I can still convey this body of awareness, then anywhere else it is easy by comparison. And it's really allowed me to streamline my teaching process and focus more on the kinesthetic component rather than the brainy intellectual component. Focus more on the direct experience and the energetic sensations. And so it's just been really phenomenal, I think, for my development as a teacher.
Well, one of the things, actually, I'm going to plug another book that I have that I forgot that I have on Amazon. It's called The Amateur Parent, a book on life, death, war and peace, and everything else in the universe. And what that book came out of is it came out of when my children were young, and I was observing them. As I was saying earlier, I'd gone through, like a big transformational experience, and I just became really acutely aware of just little simple things being, profound. And I started to see just how profoundly the innocent wisdom that children bring into the world is for our planet to pay attention to. And so that's ended up becoming that book, The Amateur Parent. But I learned so much from them because they had this fresh perspective. And I think when we teach these kind of classes, as a teacher, and you kind of alluded to it before, but as a teacher, we learn so much. And it's not just the technical, how to more effectively teach the technical teaching of Tai Chi and Qigong, but it's like we can get profound insights, that change who we are. And when it changes who we are, it changes, who we are as a teacher as well. And one of the things that came to mind as you were talking about that is the University of Missouri at Kansas City, they hired me to come in and do a Tai Chi program for kids that were developmentally disabled. And, I say kids, but they weren't really kids. I mean, some of them were younger than me, but they were all in their like 20s. Some of them were like in their 30s or maybe even more, but they all had about a 7-year-old developmental stage. And one of the things that happened while I was teaching that class, every time I'd walk in for the class each week, a bunch of the students would come up and start hugging me. And so I went in, I was going into the class one week, and one of the administrators from the university stopped me in the hallway, and she said, administration wants you to stop hugging the students. She said, we need to start teaching the students how to fit into the world. And so we didn't hug that day. But then, that week I started thinking about it, and I thought, maybe the world needs to learn something from these students. And
it's not a sign of mental health to be well adapted to a sick society. That's a paraphrase, I know, but a paraphrase of a very famous quote.
Yeah, what was that again? Could you repeat that?
It's not a sign of mental health to be well adapted to a sick society.
Yeah, exactly. And so so these kind of experiences, it's like if we let go of the responsibility for it and we just walk in as fellow students. It's like there's so much, and I always tell my, my advanced students that are starting to help teach, I say, you are going to learn way more about this stuff when you start teaching it to other people than you ever could have learned on your own, because people are going to start asking you questions. They're going to say, why do you do this? What are you feeling when you do that? All kinds of things. And so, so as we teach over time, and you've kind of alluded to it as well, is that as we teach over time, we start walking into the class as a fellow student rather than as the teacher. And that just opens up all kinds of...
Yeah, there's a term like a bucket brigade. Actually, that's the term I'm thinking of. It. I've always loved this metaphor image of a bucket brigade, where the way people used to put out fires is stand in a line and hand down buckets, and each person just handing down buckets. That's how these things have progressed and developed throughout human history, and that's why I the term channeling is just really appropriate for me, because I feel like it's not coming from me, but it's coming through me. Whatever it is that I'm offering, it's coming through me, and I'm receiving as much as, if not more, than the other people in the class.
Well, that's the whole concept. I mean, if you had to boil down Taoism to its bouille base, or Tai Chi for that matter. I mean, to me, Taoism and Tai Chi, they're such inextricably entwined concepts. Yeah. But when you boil them down to their bouille base, that's what it is. It's relaxing out of the way of this. It's relaxing out of the way of this beauty that is waiting to unfold through every human being on the planet.
Yeah. So it was one thing that's really amazing, if you think about it, if you are learning these kind of practice from a teacher, is that you're actually becoming a part of a direct line that of direct transmission that has come down through the generations, where they learn from somebody who learned from somebody who learned from somebody who learned from somebody, going back a very long time. And that actually are
you familiar with Rupert Sheldrake's work?
Well, a little bit. I've know about him through Stan Groff. Actually, that was one of the things that got me thinking about him. But
his big thing was morphic resonance.
Right.
It's like the metaphor or the image that he always uses is, when butterflies migrate from Mexico to Canada every year, no butterfly lives long enough to complete the whole migration. So how do they know? It's like these are new generations that go to the same places in Mexico and Canada every year. And he said what he claims is that consciousness creates kind of like a ripple in the field of existence. And that ripple, he calls it a morphic resonance. And so, all beings on the planet, we create these morphic resonances through consciousness repetition. And once in a while, I'll get into this. It depends on the class. Some classes can handle more stuff than other classes can. But I get into this concept of when we're going through these moving Qigong exercises, or when we're going through our Tai Chi movements, as we get familiar with them and we start to breathe and let go and let them flow through us, we may be tapping into something much larger than what it is that we're capable of doing, because we are part of a tradition that has been going on for hundreds of years. And there's a morphic resonance to that we can surrender ourselves to flow upon, and maybe have experiences that are much larger and much deeper and much more vast than we could ever, comprehend in a linear way, just by, surrendering to the flow of it like that.
Right. There's the group energy field there in the room, and there's also the larger shared energy field of the entire of all human consciousness. That's just a subset of, and on the subject of the energy field in the room, are you familiar with the research on mirror neurons?
It sounds familiar. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, it's actually something that I talk about a lot in my Tai Chi classes. The mirror neurons are neurons that model the physical and physiological state of other people around us.
Okay.
So they're a subset of our sensory and motor neurons.
Kind of like when somebody yawns, it frees you to yawn.
That's a mirror neuron phenomenon for sure. The way they were discovered was in a lab in Italy in the 1990s. They had a monkey hooked up to a brain scanner, and they left it hooked up and turned on. They went out to lunch, and the scientists came back from lunch, and one of them was eating an ice cream cone, and the monkey was not moving, looking at the scientist eating the ice cream cone, and the monkey's motor neurons, a portion of them, were firing as if it was performing the same movement, even though it wasn't physically moving.
Okay.
There's mirror neurons are the basis of, if you see somebody stub their toe, it makes you cringe.
Well, there's research that I've seen that shows when people watch people do Tai Chi, it elicits a whole bunch of relaxation responses. And that's one of the things that I found really exciting about, because when we organize World Tai Chi and Qigong Day, part of what we do is we educate Tai Chi and Qigong enthusiasts and teachers and groups on how to do media outreach so that they can get media coverage of their event. And we've gotten really, really amazing coverage. I mean, Fox News has covered it, CNN covered it, BBC television, all over the planet, Egyptian national news, Brazilian national news. And so literally on this last Saturday of April every year, there are some times where there will be millions of people that will see people doing Tai Chi on TV. And if it elicits that relaxation response, then it makes you start to wonder, what kind of an impact are we having on the global psyche, when we do this year after year. And then there was one other thing that I wanted to just throw out there that resonates with what you're talking about is Rupert Sheldrake. One of the things that he talks about is that there was a study that was going on where they had lab rats, and they were teaching them how to do water mazes. I don't know what a water maze is, but that's the terminology that he used. And so they were teaching them how to do these mazes, and then, recording their progress. And so they had a group of rats in different universities. One group was in Australia, one group was in at Harvard, and then there was another group, I think, in the UK. And anyway, the Harvard rats had a big breakthrough in their ability to navigate the maze. And right after the Harvard rats had a big breakthrough, so did the Australian and the UK rats, who had never met each other. And so, they're talking about morphic resonance earlier, and so it really segued with what you were just talking about.
Right. And I can't think of the name of Rupert Sheldrake's book off the top of my head. He's written a book documenting lots of that type of evidence.
Well, he's got a bunch of great YouTube videos too. People can watch.
The mirror neurons also tie back in with the subject of empathy, which you've mentioned several times. Mirror neurons are the basis of emotional contagion and empathy, so they're modeling the physical and physiological state of people around us, and we cannot have empathy without mirror neurons, without feeling what other people are feeling physically and psychologically and emotionally. So strengthening the mirror neuron system strengthens our ability to, our capacity for empathy. And in the vein of the sort of benefits and the collective impact on the human consciousness, I think that's a huge one, just developing the capacity for empathy. And the visual transmission component, I do daily Qigong videos, daily dose of Qigong. It's a 10 or 15 minute process for people to watch and follow along with, and people tell me that just watching it is relaxing, which is fine by me. It's great if that's what someone gets out of it. I think that's really great. And so definitely putting these kinds of images out into the news media, images of large groups of people moving in harmony and flow has to be one of the best kinds of antidote to the constantly negative news.
Well, yeah, I know that's what we thought all along. Another quality, as you're talking about that, the light bulb pop. But there was another thing that, we didn't really foresee this, because we didn't realize how widely Tai Chi and Qigong were practiced around the planet until we started organizing World Tai Chi Day. I remember I got, somebody sent me a photo from a bunch of Bolivian farmers that were up on some mountain in Bolivia, doing Qigong on World Tai Chi Day. And I had no idea that, people up in the Andes in Bolivia were doing Qigong. You know what I mean? It was a big eye opener going on here. But one of the things that really profoundly impacted my generation, I believe, is Gene Roddenberry's Star Trek. And the reason that it did, I know you're younger than me, so well,
I was totally into Star Trek.
Yeah, but it was different when I was young. This is way before you were young, and when I was growing up, when it came out, it was so unlike anything that I had ever that our generation had ever seen before. And one of the huge things that was so different was that that crew around Captain Kirk. There was an African, there was a Japanese, there was a Russian, which was really, really bizarre. And they were all, working together. And so it was like Spaceship Earth, a vision of Earth. And one of the things, as we've seen these, really massive events, people send us these videos. If you go to worldtaichiday.org, you can see a lot of these videos. And, it's like we'll get this video of this mass Tai Chi exhibition in Tel Aviv, Israel, and then you'll open another email and there will be this mass World Tai Chi Day event unfolding in Tehran, Iran, or Siberia or Russia or South Africa, and you just start to see. And then the other thing too is when a few years ago, we went to Hong Kong for World Tai Chi Day. The group invited us over for an event they were having. And while we were there, we got an opportunity to go to the Hong Kong Polytechnic University that had a Tai Chi research laboratory. Professor William Chang invited us over, and he wanted to show us their research facility. And so we were, while we were there, I started talking to him about the fact that I've started teaching a short form. You know, I was one of those people that thought, oh, you have to do the long form. You got to do the long form. And I still believe in the long form. I think there's a lot of benefits from a long form. But I had to create a short form when I did my hospital classes because the long form was not tangible for a lot of people that were dealing with certain things. And so I created a short form and found out that it really worked really well. I mean, people had benefits with diabetes, heart disease, all kinds of things just from a short form, you know, in the meditations and everything. And so anyway, I told him, I said, well, I'll show you the short form. And I started doing the short form. We were in the cafeteria, the faculty cafeteria. And I just stood up and I started going through the short form. And as I was doing it, I heard William saying, and he was talking to my wife, Angela, and he goes, see that look on his face, on Bill's face? He goes, that's the same look that we see on the masters' faces when we bring them in to do the research in the laboratory. He goes, you can see something change in the mind, you know, when the face starts to change. And I kind of lost track of where I was going with that, but it was connected to what I was talking about before.
There is kind of
wait just to wrap up real quick. Yeah, so this is how that related to that. So when we get these videos of Iranians and Israelis and Egyptians and Russians, you know, and all, you know, Venezuelans and all these different people around the world, and a lot of them are people that our mass media tells us that we're not supposed to trust or that we're supposed to dislike. But we see all these people participating in this global event on the same day, and they all have that same look on their faces. And when you see that look on their faces, you know what they're feeling because you've experienced that feeling. And all of a sudden, you're connected to these people in some visceral, beautiful, you know, way that, you know, I think maybe has profound implications.
Yeah, and what I'm thinking of is just how amazing it is that you've made yourself, in to use one metaphor, at least a kind of a lightning rod for this worldwide community and movement that really has a lot of divisiveness and.
No, I'm listening. I just didn't want the dogs to listen.
Yeah, it really has a lot of divisiveness and even a certain amount of secrecy. There's a lot of clinging to traditions that leads to these kinds of behavior, and but the similarities are much more significant than the differences when you know that somebody in a totally different nation on the other side of the globe is practicing Qigong, and their Qigong might not be exactly the same as your Qigong, but you know what they're feeling. That really cuts through a lot of imaginary barriers.
One thing. You give me an opportunity to air something. This may be emotionally purging for me, but organizing World Tai Chi Day has been one of the most beautiful experiences of my life. It's also been one of the most painful experiences of my life. I wasn't prepared for the vitriol that would come at me from some corners of the Tai Chi community. And, you know, I was unprepared for the politics of Tai Chi because Taoism and Tai Chi are the opposite of politics. I mean, that's, you know, at their essence, they're the opposite of that. And so I was caught flat footed, you know, when you know, we got a lot of arrows. I mean, we had a lot of really depressing times because people that we didn't know wouldn't like us for some reason because we looked at Tai Chi differently or that we did a different style or whatever. But one of the things that came out of this for me that was really profound is that what I began to realize is that the connections that I made with people like you and like Mohammed Essa in Egypt and different people around the planet was that it didn't matter. It was like oftentimes I connected with people that, that did a different style of Tai Chi or a different style of Qigong or whatever. But I connected with them much more profoundly than I connected with people that did my own style, because it wasn't about that. It wasn't about the external physicality of Tai Chi and Qigong. It was about what does it do to your psyche? What does it do to your vision of humanity? And so what I started to find was that geopolitical borders meant nothing to me. They meant nothing to me. As I grew through this organization of World Tai Chi Day, because I started to find out that I had compatriot spirits in different countries around the world, and it's like ethnicity, religion, geopolitical boundaries became virtually meaningless to me. Virtually meaningless to me. And so it's like,
in the spirit of Bucky Fuller, I've always considered myself to be a citizen of planet Earth. Mm-hmm. I'm an Earthling as far as my national identity. I am a U.S. passport holder, but I consider myself an Earthling. Mm-hmm. I think we should probably cap it at 2 hours. I can take this recording and make a part 1 and a part 2 for a podcast, okay. And we can definitely keep the possibility of follow-up conversations open. Maybe when World Tai Chi Day is coming close would be a good time to talk some more. But I want to talk about World Tai Chi Day this year a little bit, and also talk about something that I'm doing and right now. So for World Tai Chi Day this year, it's the 28th of April. That's 106 or 105 days away, depending on which side of the international date line you're on at the moment. Which is, it seems like, it always seems like once January 1st comes, then time just flies right up to World Tai Chi Day. And I did want to mention what you said about receiving hate mail, essentially, because you did this cool thing that brought all these people together, and now these people hate you. I'm thinking of a quote that I can't quite praise, but about you haven't done something important unless some people hate you, more or less. The only way to make sure you don't get any hate mail is to do nothing of any significance whatsoever, more or less. And there will always be some people who just don't get it. If you do something that some people love, and I've in organizing World Tai Chi Day events in San Diego, and this is one reason I'm really interested in talking about this, because I've been involved in organizing World Tai Chi Day events for San Diego. I'm going to be involved in organizing one this year, and I've experienced that version, my own version of the kind of divisiveness and just the negativity that exists in certain pockets. And for example, one organization that I won't name, but it's a very, very, very large international Tai Chi organization, said they don't do anything with any other styles of Tai Chi because they want to keep their style pure.
I'm not going to mention it either, but I know exactly.
I don't even know which organization I'm talking about, but there was a Qigong teacher who didn't want to do anything that had Falun Dafa involved in it because of political complications with the Chinese government, and so the important thing is that we're doing the work that brings people together, putting out the signal that's on a frequency, and the people who resonate with that signal rally to it and manage to connect with each other. And so in terms of World Tai Chi Day this year, April 28th, there's it's independently organized in lots of organizations. At last count, it was over 80 countries, right?
Yeah.
That have over 80 countries around the world. And it's not like a centralized top-down kind of thing at all. It's just totally volunteer effort. You just basically put out the idea, said, hey, wouldn't it be awesome if people did this? And people did that. The kind of the very shortened version of the story.
Yeah,
But
well,
what's special this year? What's new and exciting, and what are you particularly looking forward to this year?
well, one thing I want to clarify is the way that you characterized it is absolutely correct. There's no top-down structure to World Tai Chi Day or World Tai Chi and Qigong Day, and every group around the world conducts their events in their own way with their own cultural flavor, which we found to be really beautiful, because it's like a Brazilian event has like a whole different feel than maybe an event in Birmingham, UK. You know what I mean? Because it's different cultures, and so the Tai Chi and Qigong kind of take on their own cultural flavor. And but what we have done with worldtaichiday.org, that's the official website, worldtaichiday.org. What we have done there is we've taken all the experience that we've gotten from, how do you organize an event? How do you reach out to media? How do you get your local government or your state or your national government to officially recognize and proclaim your event? And so what we've done is we've recorded, we created, like we wrote the Complete Idiot's Guide to
You
Tai Chi.
open sourced it.
Huh?
You open sourced it.
Yeah. So we did the same thing. We create these tutorials. So we encourage everybody to go to worldtaichiday.org and click on join our free email mailing list, because we send out a weekly e-zine magazine, and it gives you tips and links. So like organizing kits, media kits, how to acquire an official proclamation, all these kind of things. But then what we do is we give you all that free information, and then you just take it and run with it and build whatever kind of event you want to. So we've had events, that will, like Mohammed Essa in Egypt, he creates these massive events in Cairo, Egypt every year. And he has yoga teachers there and meditation teachers there. And so it's, it becomes like a real World Healing Day event. And so everybody's, kind of takes it and does it with their own flavor. Now, what am I particularly looking forward to this year? To be honest with you, every year I'm stunned by, how we talked about going into a Tai Chi class with no expectations or responsibility. I've learned that's the only way that I can go into World Tai Chi and Qigong Day. Now we do as much, we do a lot of media work and a lot of background work that people don't know about. But as far as the expectations of the event, I've learned not to have any, because I get blindsided. It's like I'll expect some event to, be like a big successful event, and then that event fizzles out that year. And then somebody will send me this YouTube link, and I'll open it up, and there will be like thousands of people in Tehran, Iran doing Tai Chi together. And I'm like, I had no idea anybody in Tehran, Iran did Tai Chi. You know what I mean? And so it's like I'm constantly getting blindsided by this bigger picture of the world and the universe that I could never have dreamed of in my own wildest expectations. So I don't really know. We just have to see it unfold. Now, if people get on the newsletter, if they go to worldtaichiday.org and get on the newsletter, then they'll see we'll send out videos and photos from all these events around the world as they come in after World Tai Chi Day, and it's a lot of fun to do that. And sometimes David Dorian Ross does a live thing. He's done it for the last 2 years.
24 hours of world peace.
24 hours of world peace. Yeah, so you can find that on Facebook, and you can see some of the video from last year if you go to David Dorian Ross's 24 hours of world peace site.
Yeah, David Dorian Ross is he's been a massive presence in the Tai Chi world, and particularly with broadcasting Tai Chi in a kind of a visual format. And I'm actually hoping to interview him soon. We haven't set the time yet, but I'm looking forward to talking to him as well. And I'm hoping that 24 Hours of World Peace is happening this year, because that's just a great idea.
Yeah, and David Dorian Ross, he's not only been a massive presence in the Tai Chi world, but he has been a massively beautiful presence in the Tai Chi world. And
Yeah.
he and I were doing an interview. I think it was when we were in North Africa in Tunisia for World Tai Chi Day last year. The Tunisian group brought us over for their event, and so David Dorian Ross was talking to us, interviewing us through his 24 Hours of World Peace. And he said something that I have quoted so many times, and I quote it in almost every class that I teach now. And the way that I precluded is I informed my students that David Dorian Ross is perhaps the most award-winning Tai Chi competitor in the United States. I think that he's won more Tai Chi competitions than anybody else in the United States. So he's like the big Tai Chi expert of the United States. And in fact, if you've seen Tai Chi on PBS, it's very likely that it might have been David Dorian Ross. And so I tell him,
and hearing that description of him would give you no idea of just how down to earth and personable and relatable and right. Positive he is, you know?
Yeah, that's what I'm leading into here. So the first thing I do is I explain to my students, he's the big expert. Okay. Now
just climb to the top of that ladder.
Yeah, exactly. And then what I tell them is this. I say, okay, this is what he said in this interview that was always stuck in my brain. And he said that in all my years of Tai Chi, I have never seen a human being doing Tai Chi that was not beautiful. So I tell all my students that, because they're always, everybody feels klutzy when they first start, you know.
So I get good quotes just about every time I watch his videos or listen to him. He's really a fount of knowledge and wisdom, and just puts out so much material. He puts out more videos than I can even watch and keep up with. I have no idea how he possibly makes them, but I'm looking forward to talking to him soon. And I want to put in my own plug for World Tai Chi Day, because I kind of have my own formulation of the purpose of World Tai Chi Day and what it's for. It's to unite the community of practitioners locally and around the globe. It's to spread the benefits of Tai Chi, Qigong, and mind-body integrative practices to the more people, especially the people who need them the most. And it's to participate in a global wave of health and healing that is contributing to positive transformation of the world. So I would personally like to encourage anybody and everybody who is watching this or listening to this, if you are a Tai Chi person already, or if you're not a Tai Chi person, if you're one of those people who I seem to meet all the time that says, oh yeah, I've been wanting to try Tai Chi, that looks like really good stuff. I've been meaning to do that as soon as I get around to it. Now is the perfect time to try Tai Chi. World Tai Chi Day is coming up April 28th, the last Saturday in April, in a locality near you. Probably find an event, join it, find an event, support it. It's probably a volunteer, completely volunteer effort, so you can get involved. If there's not one happening near you, guess what? Great. You get to organize your own. The more there's nothing bad that can come from having more World Tai Chi Day events.
That's right.
So I want to encourage everybody to just participate in this event, in this phenomenon that happens every year. And I also want to extend an invitation to get involved with a project that I've been working on for some time and has just recently launched. I use Tai Chi as a vehicle for nonprofit work, as one of the avenues of world transformation, which is I know something that resonates with you. And what I'm doing right now is I'm teaching martial arts and Tai Chi and self-defense to kids in Nepal. My organization is Tai Chi. And the mission of Tai Chi is really twofold. It's to bring the tools of mind-body mastery to as many people as possible, especially the people who need it the most.
Can you hold that thought for just a second? I got to go to the restroom again. When you get my
Okay. Oh, wait.
Sorry, but yeah, what you're doing is really important to me, so I wanted to be able to focus on it.
Yeah, glad you can be present. So what I was saying is the mission of Tai Chi is twofold. One is to develop innovative and cutting edge delivery and teaching methodologies for sharing the benefits of mind-body mastery, and the second is to share these principles and practices with as many people as possible, particularly the people who need them the most. So the reason that I'm actually in Nepal is because this is, as far as poverty on the planet goes, this is kind of a hot spot, and this is one of the places where but this is one of the places where we can bring positive energy and really have an impact that's going to make a huge difference in people's lives and contribute to helping to Peter Diamandis, who we discussed earlier, uses the term the rising billion, helping raise the lowest socioeconomic strata of humanity. And so our mission is to bring these life-affirming practices to people who need them the most, and that includes at-risk youth, that includes the elderly, the prison population, the homeless population, and veterans, many other classifications and categories besides that. But underserved populations, the people who have the most to benefit and the most to gain from mind-body practices. So just today, we launched a Patreon page to allow people to support our nonprofit activities, as well as gain access to our teaching material and educational material that we're producing on an ongoing basis. This interview, which is going live on Facebook now, but will also go out in the form of a podcast, is one example of the material we're producing. But we're also teaching the skills of mind-body mastery. And so this page is an opportunity for people to follow us and stay in the loop with the work that we're doing and support our nonprofit efforts. which the contributions are tax deductible, but also get access to some of the most innovative and cutting edge experimentation and teaching in this area. So if you're not familiar with Patreon, it is a site that lets you pay creators in any amount that you choose to support their work. And the URL is patreon.com/chai-chi. I'll post that in the links. But that's something that is fresh and brand new and just launched today. So I want to invite everyone to join our community there and connect with my organization that way. And Bill's organization, World Tai Chi Day, worldtaichiday.org, is the hub to connect with that. The newsletter, as you mentioned, is the central resource for World Tai Chi Day news and organization info worldwide. So to come to a closing point for today, are there any open loops you think we need to close?
Well, the way that I'd like to close is, I think the work you're doing, with children is such a key thing. And you said you're working with children right now in Nepal, and that's a very fulfilling practice for you. And one of the visions that we have is to eventually see Tai Chi and Qigong and mind-body teachers like yourself who have developed systems for working with school-age children to come together as a community and to create a vehicle for imparting mind-body practices at age-appropriate levels. So starting with preschool, kindergarten, first grade, second grade, all the way up through high school graduation. And eventually, and really it should happen immediately, but mind-body practices, including Tai Chi and Qigong, should be part of every student in the world's daily education process. It would be a hybrid between physical education and health science, because that's what these internal arts are. They're a combination of physical and and understanding the health systems and the biochemistry of the body, not just in an intellectual way, but in a purely tactile, experiential way where we can actually affect our blood pressure and our blood sugar levels and our immune system, helper T cell count, all that stuff. All this stuff's proven over and over again through the research that human beings have the capacity to self-heal and self-regulate in a way that would save our health systems trillions and trillions of dollars year after year, planet-wide. And so when you start looking at the medical research, it is literally insane that Tai Chi, Qigong, and internal mind-body arts are not already part of a public education system, students' daily education. If they were taking this stuff for an hour every day, from preschool all the way through high school graduation, by the time they graduated in 12 years, we would have a planet of mind-body masters. I mean, the transformation of that would be, so mind-boggling. And, and when I start talking about this stuff, a lot of times people go, oh, there he goes again. He's getting all airy-fairy. Well, we know that Tai Chi boosts your immune system by your helper T cell count by 50 to 100%. If there was a drug that could do that, you'd be hearing about it every day on television. You just don't hear about it because Tai Chi teachers don't have a multi-billion-dollar advertising budget. And then also we know that Tai Chi helps with ADD and ADHD symptoms. And we also know that Tai Chi and Qigong and meditation help reduce bullying in the schools. And so you start looking at these problems that educators face, and they're trying to handle all this stuff from the outside in. And it makes no sense. The way that you handle it is from, I'm not saying that those solutions shouldn't be part of it, anti-bullying programs, so on and so forth. But by giving students tools to transform themselves from within, and this is all science, this isn't like religious or Eastern, mysticism or any kind of mumbo jumbo. This is hard science. And it, just to leave one last thing to resonate through the consciousness, it is literally insane that every school child in the world is not being exposed to 1 hour a day of mind-body instruction.
Amen, brother. I love that as a capstone, and the topic education is a topic that's also very near and dear to my heart. And I've worked in education as one of my careers, and I think for a follow-up discussion, this idea of the role of Tai Chi, Qigong, mind-body practices in the education revolution is a really exciting topic. So,
well, there's a study that just came out that shows that Tai Chi improves your math skills. Just that, Tai Chi into schools. You know what I mean?
That's like the tip of the iceberg. But yeah, that's an area, because I've also work as a online tutor and academic coach, and specializing in math and physics, and working with kids who are interested in having STEM careers. So that's an area that is really exciting to me. So maybe we should just leave it at that for now, and leave plenty of juicy discussion topics for next time.
It sounds good.
I really appreciate all your time. We've been on here for 2 hours, and it seems like the time has just flown. Really enjoying conversation, and I'm sure that everybody who watches this is going to get a lot of value out of this, which is my biggest hope for this. So really appreciative of you, Bill, for today, and for everything that you do, and for being such a huge inspiration to me and to many, many other people. I know you are.
Thank you.
Heartfelt thanks.
Thank you for everything you do. It's really, really beautiful.
Thanks. I look forward to being in touch soon.
Okay.
Bye.